Michael Crichton, M.D., has gained acclaim as an author, screenwriter, and director. His latest novel, Rising Sun, has created quite a storm of controversy. Michael is here to talk about that. He is well known because he is not only an author and an M.D., but also a film director and a film screenwriter. This will clearly be made into a movie. It is a fascinating read. It is a story, it's a murder mystery, but what he has done here is look at the relationship between Japan and the United States and made some very, very interesting points. Some people call it Japanese bashing, and they believe that Michael Crichton is trying to make a point about what he sees as the threat of Japan to the United States and the rest of the world, and he's here now to make his defense. Welcome.
Thank you, Charlie.
Good to have you. Now tell me, it is, I mean, you object to the notion of Japan bashing.
Very much, yeah. The reason is that the term, just as a term, suggests an unreasoned response. I mean, I think in many circles it's a euphemism or a code word for racism, right, as proclivities is a code word for homosexual behavior. And so bashing, Japan bashing is a way of characterizing a criticism as being not worth any attention. And classically, since the early 80s, when the first of the revisionist Japanese books began to appear, they have all been characterized, whatever the specific argument, they've all been characterized as bashing.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, there has, generally when you see a book come forward that makes a case against the Japanese, there's always somebody who will say, aha, it's Japan bashing, right, and that's part of the problem, is what they'll say, and that we need something else to take place. How did the book begin for you? I mean, was there an idea in which you said, I want to write about this subject? And then you said, I need to create a novel that people want to read. I need to lay onto the ideas that I want to talk about, you know, some murder mystery that will draw the reader in, so I can get his or her attention to talk about things I want to talk about.
Yeah, one thing I was very clear about was that the book had to have a compelling quality, because the other books that treat the revisionist thesis, and which have been around now, many of them for over a decade, have not been widely discussed.
Right.
And so
not nearly as much as this, not one-tenth as much as this.
So one of the things I hoped to do was to provoke some discussion, but it is fundamentally about economics. Yeah. You know, in many people's eyes glaze over. You know, Henry Kissinger was famous for saying economics bores me. Yeah, well, no. And he's not the only one.
Because he said he didn't know much about it, was his point too. Here, so what, but you and your interest, I mean, you're an MD. What was it about what was going on that caught your attention and created the urgency in you to write about it?
Well, it's two things, really. I think there's a sort of emotional issue and an intellectual issue. In 1988, I came back from a trip to several countries in Asia, and when I got back to Los Angeles and came into the customs hall and saw the slow movement of the American officials and saw the decaying appearance of the customs hall and saw
this was coming back into L.A.?
Coming back into L.A. I thought, my God, I've returned to my country and it's like coming to Pakistan. And it is very much like coming to a third world country after you've been in some of these Asian countries, which are very snappy and very quick and very efficient and very contemporary in a way that we no longer are.
And that said to you what?
It said to me, I don't think Americans understand this. I don't think Americans are aware of the extent to which the rest of the world is passing us by, economically and in many other ways. I mean, they are advancing, they're moving forward, and we're still sitting still. We're in many ways a stagnant country, and I think that, you know, the present political campaign that we're facing in some way reflects that feeling.
I'll get to that in a minute. Now, what was the second point? That was the emotional, I assume.
Okay, that was the
What was the intellectual?
The intellectual one is I have a long-standing interest in computers, and I began to be aware of the extent to which we were selling small, high-tech venture capital companies. Little companies are starting off. Somebody who has an idea for a new disk drive, or somebody who has an idea for a new kind of memory. We were selling those companies to Japan, which we were doing at the rate of 1 every 10 days for the last 5 years.
We were selling them? They were selling themselves?
They were selling themselves.
You know.
Well, Americans were selling these companies to Japan, largely. They were selling them to other countries, but primarily to Japan.
Japanese businesses, because these companies needed capital to expand, and the best price they got principally came from Japanese businesses.
That's very true.
Okay.
But the way to respond to that is in two ways. The first is that in some cases these may be imagined to have security ramifications. In some cases these may be imagined to have long-term economic consequences for the United States in the way that we're, say, imagining how we lost flat panel displays, how we lost xerography, how we lost fax machines.
Right.
And the question is whether we ought to learn our lesson, and one of the ways to learn our lessons is to keep our own innovation in-house. That's the first thing. The second thing is that we're in a very unequal situation vis-a-vis buying Japanese emerging technology. It is not available to us. So it's kind of a lopsided situation, and I think one way to look at this is to say that what Americans do really well, you know, what we don't do...
what we do really well is invent things. What we don't
right.
do so well is A, market it and refine it.
Right, exactly right.
Yeah.
We're not very good at Kaizening products, and the Japanese are outstanding at it. So at whatever point our emerging technology is sold to our principal competitors, we are arguably, only arguably, facing a very serious future for ourselves. We are, as one person described it, burning the furniture to heat the house.
And do you see any decline in that? I mean, there are those who say, yeah, he raises a very good point, and clearly that's been taking place. But if you look at the news of the last 2 months, say, Japanese stock market's in decline, Japanese capital is pulling out of the United States, they've got a lot of problems at home over there, and there are those who will say the times they are changing, and that threat is no longer there. Japanese money is not buying up everything in the United States.
Well, first of all, I'm not entirely clear about the Japanese stock market has been in decline for quite a long time.
It's a relative decline,
yes,
because it was so high, and it may be settling down to where it's equivalent to the United States.
Well over a year, and I'm also not sure. You know, if you look back over the last 20 years, one of the things that you constantly see is Japan is in trouble, Japan is changing.
Right.
And if you look at the period from 1970 to 1980, 1990, it's not such a great change.
Yeah. So where do you see it today? And what do you hope will be the response? Let's assume that people are reading this book and they get beyond what they assume to be Japan bashing, and they say, my God, Crichton's got a point here. It's a great read, but he's making a point here. What do you hope they might do? What do you hope might be a critical mass that might develop?
The first thing is, it seems to me, I would like to see a large and extensive discussion about America's policy, trade policy, economic policy, industrial policy, technological policy toward the entire rest of the world, but principally Japan and Germany are our leading competitors. The revisionist thinking suggests that our present policy is forged in a much earlier era and is now greatly to our disadvantage. People like Ross Perot agree. The question, what I would most like to see this book do is provoke an extended discussion about whether or not that's the case.
Do you think that discussion will take place in the presidential debate? Do you think that you will have with Perot, and assuming Clinton's a nominee and assuming Bush is the nominee, you will have that kind of debate?
I think no, probably not.
Or even that kind of difference on position. I mean, Bill Clinton may talk about some kind of new industrial policy.
Well, I think at the point, that's right, but I think at the point when George Bush has 3 of his leading campaign advisors registered foreign agents for Japanese corporations, we are unlikely to see any change from that quarter. And actually, if you want my own...
Sure, I do.
My own personal... I mean, I hope Ross Perot is president.
You do? Why?
Absolutely.
Why?
Because I think we have to have major changes in this country.
And what makes you think that Perot is the right guy to institute major changes? And what makes you think you know the kind of changes that Ross Perot would institute?
Charlie, I've got 3 choices. That's my choice of the 3.
That's a hard argument to make, Michael. Yeah. But you don't, let me tell the truth, you don't really know what Ross Perot would do. You just have some belief that he's a tough little
I don't know what...
And he's got $2.5 billion.
That's right. I don't know what Bill Clinton would do. I have a pretty good idea of what George Bush would do.
You know, well, in that order, you actually know more about what Bush would do because you've got 4 years and before that. Yeah, and you know what Clinton would do because he's been governor and he's been articulating his positions and laying out policy positions. That's the kind of candidate he is. You know less about what Perot would do unless you can take a read about what kind of person he is.
That's my proceeding, yes.
Yeah, because you don't really know how he feels about trade, do we? I mean, this is not, what's his name down in Texas? Who's the guy who went over to Japan and tried to buy into one of the Japanese companies? What am I thinking about? The guy who was at Mesa Oil, you know what I'm talking about?
Yes, sure. Why can't we think of it? Yes.
Yeah, we'll think about it.
As soon as we're off here. I mean, I think one of the important things is Boone Pickens, T. Boone Pickens. I mean, we have to acknowledge that the people who elected George Bush on the basis of no increase in taxes have been disappointed. And, you know, one of the formative experiences in my life was that Art Buchwald did a column about what would happen if Barry Goldwater was elected instead of
Lyndon Johnson.
Lyndon Johnson. And we would have had all these troops in Southeast Asia. I mean, in fact, what you hope the president will do and what the president actually does is very loosely correlated.
I know. Lyndon Johnson was elected because he would keep the peace.
That's right.
Let me just stay with you for a second. What is it you want to most do? Do you want to write novels? Do you want to direct films? What do you want to do most of all?
Well, right now it seems to be a good time for me to write. And
You're writing a screenplay for Steven Spielberg, right? Or you have?
Yeah, I've finished it,
Yeah, that's going to be a big film coming out about dinosaurs. What's the name of it?
Jurassic Park.
Yeah, when is that coming out?
Well, they're going to start shooting in August, so it'll be next summer.
Yeah. But are you happiest directing? I mean, is that, or are you happiest writing?
No, I think I'm happiest writing because the directing is very entertaining, but it's also frustrating. I mean, it's a highly collaborative undertaking with lots of very talented and frequently infantile people. And, it is. I mean,
Altman has it right in Players?
Absolutely, and understated if anything. And you know, so it has a certain appeal, but it's often not satisfying.
Yeah. And read any good books lately yourself?
I'm very much enjoying the work of Neil Postman.
Really?
Who has a new book out now called Technopoly.
Right. It's a pleasure to meet you. It really is. I thank you for coming. I hope you'll come back. I know it's a long way from Los Angeles, but you'll get east occasionally.
Thank you, John.
Thanks for coming.
Great.
Very much a pleasure. Michael Crichton, Rising Sun. Everybody that I know says it's a terrific read. Some people have trouble with some of the things that we've been discussing, but it is a fascinating book, and then you'll come away with some of the ideas that are back and forth with respect to this country's relationship to its future and this country's relationship to being competitive in whatever the new world order is. We'll be right back after this.